Good morning, and thank you for joining us for Arizona's Farm Bureau's virtual Ag Tour series. I'm so excited to meet with our presenters today. I am Katie Akins with Arizona Farm Bureau Ag in the Classroom, and today you are all in for a treat. We are going to be meeting with Branden Hickman with Hickman Family Farms to learn about some of their sustainability on the farm and the amazing things that they are doing with STEM and their packaging. But before we get to Branden, I just want a quick reminder, if you have any questions through today's webinar, go ahead and put that in the chat box, and I will be sure to break in and ask those questions when appropriate to Branden. We are going to have a video recording of today's webinar online. It'll be available through our social media platforms at the completion of the webinar today, and also shared out to all of our teachers. So those of you who didn't get to see us in person, I'm super glad that you tuned in to watch the video, and hope you have a great time. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over and introduce to all of you Branden Hickman. Good morning, Branden. How are you?
Good morning. Thank you for the kind introduction.
Yes, super happy for you guys to be here with us. I know your family is one of my all-time favorites. I get to interact with you guys fairly often. And of course, more importantly, I love your eggs.
Thank you.
All right, so what do you have for us today?
All right, so we're going to be covering a little bit of everything, actually. We're going to go over some of our cage-free production and what we're doing and how we're changing to the environment of what politics is bringing and what's changing from the consumer side. We're going to go over some of our apartment housing and what we're doing at a transitional home for people who might need it, or, you know, if someone gets hired and they just need a temporary spot to live. And then we're also going to go over one of the new facilities that I'm overseeing, and that's where we're actually recycling and creating bottle to product.
Awesome. Well, how about you introduce us to your family a little bit?
Yeah, so you get to see here all the generations of Hickmans. If you can see on the right side, that's going to be my family. It's my mom, Lisa, Billy. My brother, my two brothers are in the back. I'm covering one of their heads. My sister's in the front. My grandparents are in the front. That's my grandma Gertie and my granddad. I got some people in the back. To the left of us, it's my Uncle Matt, Aunt Jen. They actually live in California. They're not so much part of the business, but they still are very close to the family. My Aunt Charmin and her kids are in the middle. I got my two cousins to the left in the back with my cousin Grant and his wife. And I have my Uncle Glenn and my Aunt Audrey, which are their parents. And my Uncle Clint, his wife, Aunt Jen, and their sons and daughter.
So how long have you guys been in the egg business?
Oh gosh, it's longer than I've been alive. So I believe at this point it's about to be 78 years. So a long time. So it's been I've got to see a business grow on all fronts. I've got to see us go through a lot of ups and downs. Yeah, so it's been a fun experience. I've seen us grow from very small to very big, contract, expand, everything in between.
And it all started with Grandma Gertie, yes?
Yes, I actually think it goes a little farther, but we're going to say my Grandma Gertie started it for sure.
I always enjoy going on the website and seeing the history. If you guys don't know the history of Hickman's, they have some amazing videos on YouTube that you can tune into and hear the story. Great story. All right, I think we're going to some chickens here. Uh-oh. Are you seeing chickens?
I don't. Oh, there we go.
There we go. That's weird.
Let's, I do think it's buffering a little bit. There we go. Okay, so.
I'm going to start it again. Here we go.
Yeah, so what you're seeing is our Tonopah facility. And then what you're going to be looking at is some of the investments we're putting into cage free and the new systems involved. A lot of this is providing a sustainable life for our hens and where we're going into the future. These systems allow a lot more space for birds. It creates a more friendly environment from where we once were.
Now, Branden, these are your white leghorns. So what color eggs are they laying for us?
So what you'll see is that these lay white eggs. You'll probably, unless I've never seen it, but we'll probably never see different colored eggs from these. There will always be white, and then you'll find out that brown hens lay brown eggs. I am unsure of the science behind that.
You know, that's maybe a science, a research thing they can do. But what are these red curtains here on the side?
So the red curtains are actually where they go and lay. This actually provides privacy. It actually, they know that they can go in there, lay an egg at peace. It then follows on to what's in the egg belt and allows us to put that egg onto the front of the barn. It protects the egg from getting crushed and any other bird walking in there. Those red curtains, that helps them kind of see a direction to go to.
So that helps so you don't have eggs just all over the ground.
Absolutely correct.
Okay. And then I see these red knobs. Is that water?
That's absolutely correct. Water is sitting there, and what they do is they know to go to that. The red catches their eye. They know that they can drink water from there, and it's all separated out. If we only had so many spots where they can drink water, they would actually huddle and potentially hurt themselves.
Excellent. And then they also have feed, I see, freely as they're pecking away.
That's correct. The feed's actually transported through an auger. So the auger moves that feed from start to finish, from the front of the house to the back. That auger will slowly carry that to the front. And it turns on throughout certain times of the day, pushes it, and that way it's all balanced out. That way every single hen in that house has access to food and water.
Awesome. Well, let's head over and check out those Rhode Island Reds. Ooh, but before we talk about the Rhode Island Reds, can you tell us what we're seeing here?
Absolutely.
Hello. Go for it.
Perfect. So this is our transitional housing. This has been a big help for the company. There's a lot of people who use this if they're maybe getting out of prison, if they are maybe a hired employee, maybe a manager, or someone who's moving from out of state and might need a temporary spot to live. That gives them some time to figure out, what's next for their steps. It's been a big help for us. It's been a big help for a lot of people here, I think. A lot of the times you see that people either coming out of a bad situation, they look at this as a stepping stone to get away from maybe going back to where they came from. And it allows us to actually provide them with a very nice place to stay and work at the same time. So I think it's been very helpful. I think there's a lot of positives to this. I hope a lot of companies look into this as well.
And if people want more information, I know there was an amazing news story over this last year on this, and you guys have a YouTube video out that sort of explains this program and the benefit of the program, not only to your family as a business, but also to these individuals who are trying to find their way as well. So very cool story that I encourage everybody to go and learn a little bit more about.
All right. So the funny thing about browns is their nature is actually in size and stature is bigger. Believe it or not, they are a bigger bird. They're a lot more intimidating, no lie. But same cage systems. These actually might be slightly different. They still operate the same way. They still have access to food and water. I think their curtains and where they lay is in a different spot, but it's still very much the same style, the same same way that they need to survive in that house and way to lay eggs. If you can see in that last shot, there was a curtain right there. So.
Okay, so we do have a question. I hope you can answer it.
Do my best.
How, well, either two parts. Do you clean out the pens? And if so, how?
Okay, so there is in cage free, it's a lot more labor intensive. The cost is a lot more expensive, but we do clean it out. So I don't know if you can see in this, there is what's called a manure belt at the bottom of these cage systems. You see what they're standing on is a grating. So that is where all the manure will go to. It is then carried to the back of the house. And at the back of the house, we then transport it in from a truck and go to what we call our pellet mill, where we then use that pellet to go to farm fields and assist in growing for produce.
So their ground is a little bit off. They're not on the ground, so that
Correct.
They have the ability to have those belts underneath that system still.
Yeah, we still clean the top. It's a little more, it's pretty much manual labor, maybe some spray. If the house gets depopped, we would then clean it out with pressure spray as much as we can, make sure it's neutralized of as many bacteria that we can get to. And then we would then put a new flock in when that time comes.
Well, I know I appreciate you guys putting these videos together because, as most people are aware, you are unable to go tour Hickman's Family Farms and really any other egg farms as well as pig farms in the state. Can you give us a little background as to why you're not able to have visitors here in the barns?
Yeah, a lot of times, and we're not flagging anyone, we don't think anyone has germs, but we carry a different amount of viruses, bacteria than birds can handle. And sometimes someone might carry that in and not know that they carry it in. And in our industry, there are some viruses that might actually wipe a whole house out. And it happens in a matter of moments. It doesn't happen over the course of a month or two. It might happen in 3 days or less. So we want to make sure that they're as safe as possible. And that's part of that biosecurity standard that we have. And anyone who works in production, there's a lot of protocol, and a shout out to them, making sure that they stay clean, they wear the proper PPE, and protecting what is our business, and that's the birds. And
it's okay to say that we all have germs, because we all know that we have germs. And it's important for us to recognize that those germs are not always beneficial to others. So very good. All right. So we've got a little bit of the history of the family, and we got to see the birds, which of course we all enjoyed. But now let's get to what we are here to talk about, which is what your passion is, which is?
It is the recycled plastics. So getting involved in this, industry, we had a hard time educating the consumer on what we're doing is actually a very, very big positive for the environment, for everything we're doing. And what we did was a very budget-friendly commercial. The commercial was just a way for us to share what we're trying to accomplish. And we're not actually recreating plastic and adding more plastic. We're actually reducing plastic from the system and helping out. So this was a free commercial we made, and I think it did justice for what we tried to accomplish. And we went from there.
All right, here we go. Enjoy.
Attention shoppers, before leaving the store today, don't forget to support recycling by taking home Hickman's Family Farms eggs in its new 100% post-consumer recycled package made entirely from bottles.
Freak commercial. That's $1 million commercial right there.
So our everyone in our company makes fun of me as I failed that wink at the end. If you can see, I blink both eyes. So I'm still working on that.
It's hard when the pressure of the camera is there. We understand.
That's very true. Cool. So this is a visual on our website, and what we're showing is that what each product we make and what that actually equates to in terms of bottles we're saving. The dozen being a 12 count, which means how many eggs are in that, and then that saves 3 bottles usually on average per carton. Our 18 then does 4. And then anything else we make, we're trying to add how much we're actually reducing. And what we're doing is saving 1 million bottles weekly, and maybe even more now.
That's amazing, because I think, oftentimes when people think of plastic, they think of a material that is detrimental to the environment, or as you stated before, creating trash. So it's really neat to see that you guys are taking this product and turning it into something else.
Well, it's funny, in our industry, if you look at the egg shelf, nothing's ever actually changed in a very long time. It might be 50 years plus where we've always had a pulp product or a foam product. And if anyone looks up foam actually doesn't biodegrade for almost like 500 years. It's something close to that. When you throw it away, it doesn't just go away. Pulp is a great product. It's used for compost, but the end game, it's also came from paper. So no matter what, it was once a tree, and we cut that tree down and turned it into a byproduct, and then that changed.
Well, I know everyone is familiar with these plastic cartons as we see them in our Costco's and everywhere else. So why don't you give us a little tutorial on how you do it?
Yeah, so I got a fun video after this slide, and we'll go over kind of the whole operation. So what we're looking at right here, so on the left side is wash flake, and that would be where we buy our flake from our partners in California. And what they do is they have a separator. That separator usually does water bottles, anything clear. They separate the green bottles, the brown bottles. They'll then wash it and clean it, because you can't just throw anything that maybe someone once drank out of. There'd be a lot of germs in that. So they do a lot of cleaning. They make sure there's no glue, there's no trash involved. This then gets grinded up into that form right there. And that's a very, very fine plastic, because typically that plastic was once made from Coca-Cola, Dasani, a water bottle company, as a brand new product. And we're actually taking it and pulling it from the system and then using it. The material on the right, that regrind, that is actually material that's been through our system probably once or twice already. And as you can see, the different colors, every time you use plastic, it actually degrades that plastic, and it will burn it almost. The special term would be called intrinsic viscosity, or IV. Every time you put plastic through our extrusion line, it'll get browner and browner and browner. So the goal is to try and use the material that someone else is creating, and we're actually pulling it from the system afterwards, and then we're reusing it. So as long as that wash flake is involved and it's only had one cycle, we can use that as in our system as a new input, and then actually increase the IV.
Excellent. All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop share so you can share, and we can get to the videos on your end.
Cool. All right, can you guys see this?
We can see it.
Wonderful. Okay, so what you guys are looking at right here is a pile of our wash flake. And this is an input into our feed station, which you'll see very shortly. As you can see, so here's being loaded. And we'll go to 2 minutes so I can kind of better explain that feed station. So here we're loading into this feed station. And what we're doing is taking these 1,500-pound totes, and these 1,500-pound totes of this wash flake is being mixed with our regrind, that little tote to the right here. And then over here in the third station is another input where we can add anything over there, and that might be IV enhancer, that might be to increase the value of the plastic, make it bright, try and get that yellow out so that way it doesn't scare people away from our product or other products. It actually it looks a little more fresh. So after this, we'll be loading, and this pulls about, depends on our batch, but we do a certain amount of wash, regrind. We do about a 60-70% wash. We do about a 30 or 40% regrind, and we change it all the time based on pricing. We follow a pricing on that, on plastic index, and sometimes that increases and decreases, and we do our best to make a quality product at the best cost, and that's kind of the goal we do. So then we'll go to 354. And what you're about to see is this is the batching system. This is kind of the kettle. This is where everything gets mixed up. The system's telling it what we say, what we want to make that batch. So if it's a 60-40%, we'll pull that product. This system mixes that up. And what it does is it then gets ready for the reactor. The reactor is a very, very fancy piece of equipment, and this is bringing up the IV I talked about, and that IV is very, very important in plastic. If we don't watch that, that's how you get that brown tint. And here's a portion of this. Let's see if I can kind of get a better visual. So if you can see this piece in the back corner right here, that's working on torque, it's working on speed, and it's working on temperatures. There's a lot of things going on. So I like to call it, you can call it a protein shake, you can call it the hurricane. And what it does is it's blending, it's moving at high speeds, it's using a lot of variables at once to pressurize that plastic and make sure that IV is staying increased. So here's a form of the system. After this is done, it's then telling it to push it into this. This is an auger. This is pushing everything that's finished from the arema and prepared for the extrusion line. It's then setting it up to get put into this screw press right here. So let's see if we can find a better visual on that. Okay, so I'm gonna stop it right here. This is a long, very hot screw, and the screw is very, very slow. And what this screw is really doing is creating a heat. That heat is then melting and shearing that plastic to a melt. What's happening is that temperature, it's been prepped and set up to then be prepared to melt through what's called a die. We'll get to that in a second, but it has to hit this very, very, I call it the HR nightmare. I'm actually, I watch it all the time. This is a very important part of our process. This is where screens are changed at, and you actually have to open it up. The screens will pretty much tell you when they're ready to be changed. We scrape plastic off. You have to pull the screens out and place new ones in. And what those screens do is catch any debris, very, very fine particles. These screens are about this big. They're very small. They have very, 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 very tiny holes to push that plastic through. And it cleans that plastic and preps it to get put into the die. That way we don't have film coming out with material in it that might actually hurt our system. What we're seeing right here is the calendar rolls. The plastic gets, once it's done with the screen, it goes through our neck right here. And it gets purged out here at a very high pressure. These calendar rolls are actually pressing it at a very cold temp. So when that melted plastic comes through, it's then temping it and cooling it. So that way we can start creating that sheet. Learning this process actually took a little while. I think we all, a part of my crew, have some scars and bruises from that one. We're operating pretty good right now. As you guys can see, this machine can't stop. So when you turn it on, if you have an error happen in between, you need to be able to think on the fly, because once that plastic starts rolling, there's no stop button. You have to actually keep it moving. And this thing moves very quick. So a lot of times we've had learning process. We had plastic going out to the streets of Avondale, or we had to go straight to a dumpster and move street as fast as we could. So it was a very fun learning process. I think we all learned a lot here, and I think it got a lot of my group together better, because we all had to put a lot of hours in to learn this. So next steps, after you hit this calendar roll, you're going to see this silicone applicator. And you can input some, different materials on that. We're still learning this process a little bit. But you have to apply silicone on both sides to prevent plastic from sticking to each other. So when it gets shipped in the supply chain part of it, when it gets packaged, if it sticks together, you actually are tearing it apart. There's something on the plastic that catches each other. So if you don't put a silicone content or some type of content on there to prevent that, there is a problem when it comes to labeling or sending it to our plants on the next steps downstream. What you'll see next is the accumulator and the roll station. The roll station, this is the final process to this. When the guys unwind a roll right here and they actually pull it off, as I said before, the machine doesn't stop. So what you do is you stop this portion to get ready and you start pushing this film onto the next portion. What this accumulator does is provide us time to be able to do that. It works as hydraulics. So as you unload a roll and you stall the machine, it extends the sheet film and gives you about a couple minutes of time to be able to unroll that, start it up again. And then as you finish it and you start it again, it then goes back up to a balanced level. So it's really fun. This is my favorite part of the machine. I think it's really cool to watch. It extends all the way down to the top and bottom. And then once you hit the bottom, there's problems that you have to fix pretty quick, or you know, you have a really fun day after that. So after that, we'll hit this 10th minute, and this is the finished product. So as we go, we stage this, we get this ready for our next step, and that's our thermal forming area where we're making our egg cartons. We're making anything that might be in PET. It could be lettuce baskets, grape baskets, strawberry baskets.
So Branden, here in this, they're seeing the clear and they're seeing the green, which is what they see the different cartons of at the store. Mm-hmm. How do you get the difference, the clear and the green? How does that happen?
So believe it or not, I believe green is actually on its way out. I think Sprite's been getting, I think they've been getting a lot of flack on dyeing it, because that's what you do is you dye this plastic, and you can dye plastic any color. You can dye it black, green, brown. That's how you get your root beer bottles. And the problem with that is there's no aftermarket for PET. It's a very, very small portion of what this really is. And if there was a bigger one, it'd be a lot easier. The problem with it is once it goes green, the next step is really dyeing it black. We're trying to reuse it in green, and if no one takes black or green, it's just there's nowhere for it to go. So what you're seeing right now is a lot of people converting their product lines in plastic to clear, because that can close the loop forever, and you can keep bringing that value up slowly and decreasing the trash content still.
Excellent.
All right, after that, I am done, and we can go on to the thermal.
So we have a question before we go on to the thermal, and that is, do you notice a change in sales with this initiative?
I wouldn't say we noticed a change in sales. We noticed a change in how much scrap at the store there was. So if you notice pulp and foam, you can still check your eggs, but one still sneaks by. When you get home, you still have a cracked egg. What we found out with plastic is it reduced the amount of returns happening because people could see the bottom and the top. So all of a sudden, that drastically reduced, and with foam and pulp, it still is a heavy amount of that. But did it change sales? Right now in today's time, I don't think it did. All it did was kind of help us get started in this initiative on recycling.
Excellent.
Absolutely.
Okay, you have a magic word for this one. What was that?
Yeah, so this is kind of where, this is the thermal former. So if you want to play, let's see if we got that video. This is where it kind of bakes, it's an oven at this beginning right here. At the beginning of that machine, there's an oven heating that plastic, and where that roll stock is going into, it's heating it, and it's not melting it, but just enough to be formable. And it's then going into what's called the mold station. The mold station is where your design to the spec of your product is sitting. And after that plastic is heated, whatever form you can make out of a mold, you can then form that plastic around. there's a lot of temperatures involved in that mold. There is water cooling going on, and it's pulling the hot water out. It's allowing that plastic to get hard after it's molded. Because if you didn't do that, you might find out your plastic form doesn't actually stay structured. It might actually fall apart, it might melt still. So that cooling helps that process a little bit. The next station, right where Susanna is standing in front of, that is a knife station. So that's where we are cutting the form of that mold. So knives can do a lot of different things, but there is a very fine process on making sure it doesn't cut too much, because if it's too hard on that stamp, you're actually going to have product falling before it hits the end of this machine. So it's actually just barely nicking that plastic towards this end, and just enough to be able to push it through the sheet that we once made. It then goes to the end of the machine, it gets upstacked, and we then palletize it for the plants. Yeah, so here's another version of that oven. This is both, there's top and bottom, and they're tiles. These tiles are all working at similar temps. I do believe we go to about 400 degrees, and believe it or not, the ambient temperature, especially being in Arizona, is a big factor in this. So in the summertime, we can actually reduce the heat, believe it or not. And then in this wintertime, we actually have to increase the heat because it gets so cold, and the plastic is actually working around that ambient temperature along with the machines. Cool. So as you can see, this is the backside of these molds. There's a lot of there's a glycol involved in this, which is it's a chemical made so rusting doesn't happen. Water cooling is going on. The molds are very, very fancy piece of technology. There's a lot of inflow and outflows going on as we're pressing that plastic. All right, and part of our team, that's Phil Scott to the left. He's the manager. I got Keith, he's a mechanic, and Susanna, who's an operator. And these were the people I could corral for the moment. They've all done very good at this building, so I had to pull them in for a photo with me.
So how many people do you have each day working at the plant?
So we have, I'd say total right now, with how much we're just starting, I'd say we have about 15 people. And we could probably build it up as we add more shifts, as we maybe work around the clock in that extrusion line. We could probably add another 15. So total about 30 or 40 people needed once this place gets to max potential. That's down the road a little bit. So.
And right now, what hours are you running that equipment?
So we do 2 shifts, and what I found out for one of my shifts, and a lot of people like this, believe it or not, the wake up is very early. We do a 3:30 in the morning shift to 12, and everybody wants that shift because everybody gets off very early, and you get the whole day ahead of you. And then we do a 12 to 8:30 p.m. shift. And that extrusion line that you guys all saw, that would be working in a perfect world. That's going to be working around the clock 24/7 for several months straight. And then we would then PM it, we would maintenance it, get it started, and then ready for the next batch of future orders.
Now, we saw a lot of technology throughout the videos, right? A lot of computer screens, a lot of things with the computers and robots and machines. And we heard you use a lot of science terms. Okay. So what is your background? What did you go to school for? Did you get all of that science and technology background through your schooling or through on-the-job experience here?
Okay, so I went to school. I went to Colorado State University, Pueblo. It's a smaller part of Colorado. I went for business administration with a little bit of finance background. I believe it or not, when I first started, after I got done with college, I wanted to work everywhere else but my family's company. I wanted to work anywhere else. So for a couple years, and I'm blessed because my family let me do what I felt was necessary at that point in time. As I got through that, I decided I wanted to add value for my family and see where I could assist and help. And I've learned on the fly. They expect a lot out of us, so we get put into situations where we have to at least assist and help, or provide some type of input to help anyone around that's working for us. So it's a little bit of mix. I learned a lot from school. School taught me a lot of the broad knowledge on management, finance, how to handle situations, but then on the fly, getting put into the situations or anything in this company as I've grown, I've learned a lot through that too. Because some of it you're going to have to learn as you go. There's no perfect way to run a business. There's a lot of wrong ways, but I guess you learn to kind of handle that as you go.
So Branden, did your family say, hey, this is something we want to do with our cartons, or did you come to them and present this opportunity to them?
I think my father started this communication with the company we're actually partnered with in California, which is Global Plastics, and they've been a huge help in this project. I think we just merged our ideas together, and then I helped alleviate the time away from him to be able to focus on the whole. I kind of took this on and started really pushing it forward. And then as this grew, as we invested more time into equipment, we kept it operating and running, and then we've got to where we are now. The molds were the hardest part of this whole process. We had to figure out how to make sure that our carton went through several steps of automation down the way. And with plastic, we're one of the only ones with our plastic that's a bifold. So if you ever go to the grocery store and you buy an Eggland's Best carton, or you go to Whole Foods and it's a dozen, there's a lot of trifolds, which means there's 3 panels. We're one of the only ones that figured out how to do it with only 2. Now the 18s, are a standard, but the R&D behind making sure this mold worked effectively all the way through our system was extremely difficult. We went through a lot of hurdles in that process, trying to get it through. When you start something new at a mass volume, you find out all your weaknesses after the fact. So even though we made changes and thought we were correct, when we started running thousands of dozen into it, we found out later down the road that we made a lot of mistakes, because once you do something 1,000 times or 10,000 times, it really starts exploiting what you missed.
That's amazing. So Branden, last sort of follow-up question. What are your goals for this initiative, or where do you want to take this in the future? What are you hoping happens as you continue to work with this product and Hickman's? Is it to work and produce things for other people as well, or which direction are you hoping to go?
I'm hoping to take this and maybe even branch out a new company off of our Hickman's. I'd like to keep making sure we're hitting a sustainable package, and that was to, and that it's working, and the goal is to keep expanding it. I'd like to make more products. I'd like to add a lot more volume. I'd like to maybe go even farther downstream. And right now we have all the steps, but the next step would be a wash station. And that would be actual where we're receiving trash, we're separating, and we're turning that into flake and providing that input for this facility that you just saw. Now that facility is getting started in that is a very costly startup, so I don't know where we're at on that. I think we're ways away, but maybe one day when things get a little more caught up in the United States, because I do think we're behind in terms of how we look at trash and how we're recycling and reusing and repurposing. So once that catches up, I think it'll be a little easier.
Awesome. So if people want to make sure that their egg cartons that they've already used or their water bottles they used find their way to you guys to go through this process, how do they do that?
So right now, that's why I want the wash station. There is no way to do that. I would say do your best at recycling, putting it into the blue bin, making sure that your waste companies have that option. It would then most likely hit our recycler eventually, which would be Global Plastics in California, and then we would then pull that that product from them. So maybe one day, that's why I would like to get that started. Maybe one day we can claim we can do that.
So what's something that they can do with those soda bottles to help with that washing thing? Maybe rinse them out before they recycle?
Yeah, rinse them out, make sure that label's off. Just do your best, but I know there's process involved to make sure we can get that done for you too.
I love it. Well, Branden, unless you have anything else to add, I want to give a huge thank you for you, not only for providing us with the original tour, but for joining us here this morning to share the story of what Hickman's Family Farms is doing with your PET cartons. I know they're some of my favorite when I go to the store. I'm a tactile person too, and they're nice and smooth. I don't know what it is. I just like to touch them. But a great example this morning of how STEM is taken from the classroom into the workforce, especially in agriculture. You know, a lot of people think of agriculture as those livestock animals, right? We think cows, sows, and plows, but it's important for people to recognize that agriculture has become so much more, and it is all of the technology and the science that we're learning today being put to good use. So thank you for showing us a great example of that this morning.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Well, we wish you the best of luck, and we know we will continue to follow your story with Hickman's and recycling.
Thank you.
Stop share. They can see your face nice and big, so give them a stop. Thank you, Branden. I appreciate you.
Yeah.
All right. Bye, everyone.